did a call, and it was like a all player call with the NBA and the WNBA, and uh, I got forever First Lady Michelle Obama, right? So we got on a Zoom so we all could just talk. It was the first time since I've been in the league, probably ever, that the NBA and WNBA have ever all got together on a call.
But we all know that the devil is in the details. Microcosms turn into macrocosms, and small hinges swing big doors. So focus.
The size of Dove that are carrying and bringing out many different types of black men to have a conversation, so that the world starts to see there's just not one type of black men. Black men aren't just athletes, or black men aren't just this way or behave this way. There's many different versions of us, the way there are of any type of people.
I just so often hear parents like, well, when I was and when I did and what I had, and I'm like, I get that, right? And I get some of the things that I have that my children don't have. But I also know, you and I talked about this yesterday. I don't know what I would do if my greatest mistakes as a preteen or a teen were memorialized on video and for anybody to share at any moment they wanted to trigger me.
Ourselves, right? White men are more likely to see a black man as athletic. What leaves out of the top 10? Smart. Smart disappears.
Let's keep this moving, because I'm really interested to hear about this next thing and hear from this next young man. We're about to get into the side effects and bias of stereotypes on black men and boys. And joining us is Dr. Rashawn Ray. Dr. Rashawn Ray of the University of Maryland, my good old University of Maryland in College Park. It's not too far from here. Hey, Rashawn, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, Joe. Great to be on with you at the Black Men Summit, and I enjoy listening to you every morning on the radio. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
You listen to that show? You
Yeah,
must not be that much of a doctor. I'm just kidding. So let's dive right into it. You've heard all of the discussion we've had today. We've all applauded Dove, Men+Care for doing what they're doing, and the NBPA for doing what they're doing. And we've heard a lot of different angles, if you will, coming from this non-monolithic voice of black men. So you regularly testify at federal and state levels and have written over 50 books and op-eds about trauma and socioeconomic effects of racism on black people. For the layman, break that down, please.
Well, look, first, what I aimed to do was to partner with Dove, Men+Care, and the NBPA, because first, who isn't committed to racial equity? If we're not vocal about racial equity, then our neutrality becomes part of the problem. Our silence becomes our acceptance. So as a scholar and an academic, it becomes important for people like me to get our research outside of what we call the ivory tower, which are the confines of universities that we know from you, from me, that most of us aren't necessarily afforded these opportunities. So part of what Dove is doing is highlighting how stereotypes matter and what we can do to actually deal with the biases against black boys and men, and then empower black boys and men to take care of our mental and emotional health. Because we've heard about the way that bias plays out in our lives. But what we oftentimes don't talk about, and we've heard this from the NBA players a bit, is the way that bias, the way that racism and stereotypes and discrimination ends up harming our mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical selves.
Well, I mean, break it down for us. I mean, how profound is that? Are those biases against us? We've heard the Black Men Study earlier today, and that Tael brought out for us, and it was intriguing for me and very insightful. So, from where you sit, how does that happen? What is happening with us on the inside?
Yeah, well, look, it has pervasive ramifications. I'll give you one example. Some research that I've done on neighborhoods that experience over policing. And you know this, whether we're talking about Southeast DC or whether we're talking about right outside the DC line in southern Prince George's County and other parts around the country that I've lived, from Nashville to Atlanta to Oakland, that we see the ways that Black bodies are over policed, particularly Black men. Black men are more likely to be stopped when they're driving a vehicle. They're more likely to be frisked when they're stopped by police. And the ramifications of that end up being that people who live in neighborhoods that are over policed, if you're Black and you're a man, that your mental health ends up suffering. You experience higher levels of depression, higher levels of anxiety. If you're a woman, you end up experiencing physical health ramifications, obesity, diabetes. And what's important is we know that Black men are the group of people who actually utilize healthcare the least. So we are walking around with all of these thoughts in our heads, carrying around this emotional baggage while our mental health is suffering. And it leads to, later in life, us having deleterious or negative coping strategies. So unlike, say, white men, we end up relying on drugs and alcohol later in life, not necessarily because we're trying to have fun, but we're trying to cope, because we know that we might experience something when we go to the hospital. We might not be treated right. We've seen this during COVID. And ultimately, it leads to us developing health conditions earlier and dying sooner than our white counterparts.
You brought up a lot of stuff for me. I know a number of older Black men who went down that path, who ultimately, fell ill because of it. And, we've all heard stories about, man, he just was tired. The brother just was tired of it all. Can you please share what you've seen recently in light of 2020 and what we can do as a community to help? Where do the average, okay, let's say I'm an average healthy or seemingly healthy, relatively healthy Black man. What can I do to help my brother, my son, my nephew, my cousin, my community?
Well, look, the first thing is to utilize healthcare, particularly if you live in a predominantly Black area like the DC area, but there are others, of course, around the country. What that means is if you're having problems, and as Marshawn Lynch says, look, take care of your mentals. If you're having problems with your mentals, then you need to identify a counselor or a psychologist to speak to. Oftentimes you want to maybe identify someone who's Black, or in particularly a Black man. We know that there are fewer of them, but suggest that they go and talk to someone. Of course, clergy becomes good as well. Rely on a pastor, but find someone who can help you cope with that. The second thing we have to do is, as Black men, and we heard Jeff Johnson talking about this, we need to continue to have conversations with each other. We need to check in. It's okay to make statements like, hey, man, I'm thinking about you. I'm caring about you. I'm just making sure you're all right. And part of what that means then is providing healthy coping options, which means, hey, are you eating healthy? Are you exercising? And one big thing we know that happens with Black men, there's a concept in social psychology called John Henryism. We've seen this a lot during COVID, but even before this. This is the concept that says because Black men know the stereotypes about them, we try to overcompensate for that. And in that overcompensation, we just continuously work. We continuously try to push back against those stereotypes. And sometimes it's okay to say, hey, look, you don't have to go 150 miles per hour. We want you here for the marathon, as Nipsey Hussle would say, and not just necessarily the sprint. So part of what that means then is we need to utilize healthcare. We need to get around people who can help us think about taking care of our bodies and our minds. And then we need to relay the strategies that we've learned, positively and negatively, to our children, particularly our boys, so that they don't make the same mistakes that we made growing up.
How do forums like this help?
Well, look, forums like this are extremely important because, I mean, look, you're bringing in NBPA, you're bringing in Dove, bringing in people like you, other experts. And part of what it does is raise awareness. And what we hope with these type of events, that people will hear us talking about various things. They'll go look things up. They'll say, you know what? Wow, I haven't been to the doctor in 3 years. You should go to the doctor every year. Find someone that you can trust. People might also say, wow, I do realize that when I get around certain groups of friends that I might have negative coping strategies because I'm experiencing racism and discrimination at work. So I need to get around people who can help me deal with that. So these conversations raise awareness. They also raise awareness that, look, Black men are heterogeneous. We're not all out here just doing various things. And even for our athletes, we see the way that they have layers upon them. They're smart. They're out here trying to strive for their communities. And it's important to combat negative stereotypes that people have about Black boys and men.
Man, I'm going to try to do my part as much as I possibly can. But I think that, armed with some of this information I'm getting today, I can fight a better fight and a better battle. You spoke about Black boys, specifically. I'm a father. I have a Black son. Jeff just alluded to his 3, but I also have my little girl. And, if you can, what does this mean for her? She's 11 years old, coming into this world. What does all of this mean for her?
That's a great question. I mean, I have 2 boys. I have a 9 and 10-year-old. And when it comes to girls, part of what we have to recognize is that some of the negative stereotypes that exist for Black boys can also exist for Black girls. And Black girls and Black women continue to empower Black men. And part of what we have to think about is to ensure, particularly as men, that we provide our girls and young women with positive role models and outlets of people that they can potentially be with, that they can choose to have a family with. But more importantly, we can continue to tell them they can be anything they want to be, from coming up in Prince George's County to being the vice president at the White House, that these are the sort of things that can happen for our Black girls. It can also happen for our Black boys. They can be anything they want to be when they have the resources they need. And we need to do, the final thing I'm going to say is, we have to role model. There are 4 important parts for this. We have to be visible, which we're doing now. We have to be positive, which we're doing. We have to be academic. Doesn't mean you have to have a PhD like me, but you value education. And then we have to be accessible. And when we do those 4 things, we can start to empower our young people to realize what they can actually be in life.
Man, thank you so much. Brothers and sisters, this is Rashawn Ray. This is Dr. Extraordinaire Rashawn Ray. Can I call you that, brother?
I appreciate it, bro. We all in this together. We just trying to help out our community. And I mean, from Dove to NBPA to you, I mean, it's just great work. I mean, these forums are really, really important to bring together athletes, entertainers, academics. Is rare when we have the opportunity to all get together, and it really shows what our community is actually doing to help out people.
Thank you much, man. Rashawn Ray, everybody. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
I was listening to the brother doctor speak. He was so profound in how he described this belief system has created the John Henry image of Black men, and Black men being intellectually inferior, physically superior, right? Judgmentally inferior, but superior in physical deeds, and therefore to be feared. And the stereotype of the Black man as a violent, drug-toting, gun-toting, drug-dealing criminal. And we have to just deconstruct that belief system by taking it on. We have this moment, and I think one of the most important things we have to do in this moment is talk about the nation's legacy of racism.